Okay, now we're on to the competitive intelligence report. One thing that's interesting about the competitive intelligence report is that you see everything. And by that I mean you know exactly what all of your competitors did and basically everything that happens on the branded sales forecast page. You can see with 100% clarity what your competitors are doing. And so as I step into this, I think about what happened to me. And if you think of the old famous business book, Who Moved My Cheese? I think of it this way: Who ate my cheese? So as you look on the top, you can select the different regions that queues up to North America. I've already put my company in, company C. And so I go in and say, I did a very curious thing. I raised my internet price to $120 per shoe. And my market demand pretty much cratered because people said, I'm not stupid. I'm not paying $120 for a $4 shoe when I'm sorry, for a 4-star shoe when Team D's got it for 70 and Team A's got a 6-star shoe for $64. So I'm the one that drove that looked like the prices went way up in the internet realm. And to be honest with you, I'm going to be curious to go into my operating profits to see how that affected me. But I guarantee you, it's not going to do good things for me to be this far off of the industry standard in the long haul. You can see by getting aggressive at internet, Team A picked up a lot of sales. Don't know what that did to their profit margin. Again, that's something I can probably figure out by going back and I can try to figure out by going back and looking on the footwear industry report, trying to figure out which profit margin might be theirs. They certainly gobbled up a huge chunk of the margin, but they also introduced channel conflict. So their wholesale price was $55 only, and then their internet price was only $9 more than that. So what you're going to see is these retail outlets utilized. In this round, everybody had 3,000 outlets. Now they've got a slightly above average market share, but the fact that they've induced channel conflict is going to cause some of the retailers that would normally be willing to stock their shoe to drop their shoe, and that's not a good thing. And again, like I mentioned to you, you always want to use all the retailers that are available to you. As companies grow market share, you'll see they have more retailers available. And so a company that gets beat down in market share, this is where they have to over time rebuild their market share so that more retailers will be willing to carry their shoe. So a lot of interesting things happening in the internet market, uh, but uh, we'll see what happens. Now, as I get it down to the wholesale market, because there's 5 teams, remember everybody's fair share is 20%. You can see that I was right at my fair share. I had three, I'm sorry, 30,000 shoes that people would have liked to have bought, but I ran out of shoes in North America. This is just about a perfect number. Anytime I can keep my overage or underage under 100, that's usually pretty good. Obviously, closer to zero is a huge advantage. Now, Team B, who again, remember, came in last place, they had a lot more demand than they had shoes to sell. They had demand for 2.3 million shoes, and they only sold a little less than a million shoes. So that additional 1.3 million of demand, it went to all these other people. Team A and Team D were the big beneficiaries of that standpoint. So I kind of know what happened with A, and notice how they have a relatively low price. As a rule of thumb, figure about $2 per star. So if I compare them to me, they are 1 star below me. They've got a few less models than I've got. So they probably should be charging maybe $3 less than my shoe, but they're $10 less, which is why they had so much demand because people said, I want this shoe. Now, this is also why they lost a lot of money. They stimulated all that demand, didn't produce those shoes, and very well couldn't have made a profit at that price anyway, although you're going to see they didn't do this in all the regions. Um, so this is the sort of thing I'm looking at. And I'm saying, okay, who else is a 4-star shoe? I look at the retailer demand. I had more demand than D, who finished a place ahead of me. So I think that's pretty good. They ended up selling more shoes because they had them available. Lucky for them that they made a forecasting mistake, but benefited from B's mistake where they picked up some of that extra demand. Models were the same. Advertising, I was 1.5 million more, and I was $2 cheaper. Everything else is pretty much the same. Retailer support, not that big of a deal. Delivery time, the same. Nobody's got any celebrity appeal. So no wonder to me that my demand was higher than theirs. This was simply a matter of stockage. This is curious. Team E spent no money on advertising. And you can see that their demand was higher than me and D. And why is that? Same price as us, even though they're offering a 7-star shoe. Huh, very interesting. So have they figured out that no advertising is the way to go? I'd be really cautious reaching that conclusion, but I've never seen anybody try this, and that's an interesting outcome. But notice, if you remember, Team E was one that they didn't do this in all the regions, I'm sure, because they weren't that low in marketing expense. But that's an interesting outcome that goes to show you how powerful these factors are. They also had significantly more models. So the question would be, were they able to still make more money even at that price because they saved, compared to me, $8 million they didn't spend on advertising? Again, I've never seen anybody zero it. Don't know that zero is ever really the best answer, but it's interesting they tried that. So that's something that really makes me wonder about what old Team E's up to. I look at the private label segment. I bid on private label and woohoo, I won. I sold everything I said I wanted to sell. Everybody bid in North America. 2 teams didn't, their bids weren't accepted because they were the higher price. I can go over here and see that the demand was 1,100 shoes, and we had, or 1.1 million, we had over 2 million offered. This is interesting how they did this. Notice that team A and E bid the same price, $33. Usually the way it does the tie break is it goes to your image rating from the previous year. So that's a benefit of having a higher image rating. They had the same one, so I don't know how they apportion the shoes out where they let, well, I do know how they apportion it out. They let A sell all of theirs, and then E got what was left. I don't know why. Actually, I don't know how it decided to split those. It's just a fluke that you had the same image rating coming out. But you can see how had team E bid $32.99, they would have sold an extra 185,000 shoes because they would have taken everything away from team A. Because if you're 1 penny under these guys, you get everything before they get anything. The last thing I want to show you is this competitive map at the bottom. This shows you relative market share and where people are positioned on the grid. But don't think, oh, well, right here's a blue ocean strategy because there's not too many people with low price, low SQ, and mini models. The game just doesn't really work like that because you're dealing with broad product lines and the like. It's possible for teams to sit on top of each other and both do very well. When you get down to this little chart, it says, what are my strengths and weaknesses? All this is very simply, am I above the industry average or below the industry average on these things? So I don't really want you to view them as strengths and weaknesses. What is your position trade-off in the fit that you've generated? So I really don't pay much attention to this. Usually the picture is pretty much the same in all the 4 regions, but this year, not so much. So I go to Europe, Africa. Again, I have a microscopic share in internet. I had just a few extra shoes. Again, this is almost like perfect demand. Everybody had either a few shoes extra here or lacked a few shoes here. But when you're in the double digits, that's not too bad. Again, Team B was the big winner here, and they did have the demand to match. I bet they were losing money at $37 and 3 stars. Notice that Team E advertised here. They had 7 million in advertising. And you can see that they had 200 models, pretty much what everybody else had. And sure enough, they had the highest, well, second highest demand in the industry. So B, good old B, making me wonder here if they're going to be a crazy competitor, if they're going to lose money every year. And the answer is they're quickly not going to do that, because when you lose money, you have to take on a bunch of debt. You're just sinking yourself. But you can see how one competitor can go out and buy market share, got a huge chunk of the market, but probably no profits. Not much interesting going on in the private label. Well, I shouldn't say that. You can see that team C, I bid 35. There were shoes available, but my bid didn't get accepted. Why not? Well, I didn't manage my production correctly, and I offered a 3-star shoe when 4 was the minimum. Bad on me. Into Asia Pacific, here I was the beneficiary of a lot of people that got real aggressive on their pricing, mainly B again, and didn't have the shoes. So you can see, relatively speaking, my demand was the lowest in the industry. Yet I picked up a lot of extra shoes simply because I had them available. This doesn't make me feel very good, because this is a fluke. I'm not figuring these people are going to make this mistake every round. And where I had a situation where I had way too many shoes based on my demand, and I got to sell them. I got to sell a good chunk. So here I'm actually the big kahuna in terms of market share, but I know it was a non-sustainable fluke. Here in private label, again, I bid and didn't win any because I didn't meet the minimum stars and my price was above the maximum. Oops. Lastly, Asia Pacific. Here I ran out of shoes. I had a lot more demand than I had shoes available. I did bid in private label, got them all accepted at a very nice price. And again, everybody here, we all three bid the same price. Probably that was because what was in the computer and nobody bothered to change it. You're not going to see that work long term, because people will get smart about that. Here they bid 91,000 pairs of shoes and didn't get their bid accepted, even though there was room. And I believe that's because you have to bid a minimum of 100,000 shoes. So I think they were below the minimum bid, is why that didn't get accepted. So at this point, I have a really great understanding of who sold what, where, and most importantly, why. And this is where I start to make my strategic decisions for the next round. I say, okay, what do I need to do with my pricing? Probably my internet pricing needs to come way down. And then in here, what am I going to do with my price, my SQ rating, my models? This is the big part of my position. Now, how am I going to manage my marketing down here? And then what am I going to do in the private label? How do I think that's going to play out? What sort of price am I going to need to bid? These are the decisions I'm thinking about as I conclude my time on the corporate intelligence report, and a competitive intelligence report, rather. And then I'm going to step into my operating reports to kind of confirm what I think I'm seeing. Join me in that next video.